The manila envelope with my name misspelled Marlene with a damn I was the first red flag. HR slid it across the table like it was a parking ticket, eyes already glazing over like they'd practiced the speech in a mirror while brushing their teeth. Due to internal restructuring, your role has been deemed redundant. But hey, you've had a good run, 12 years is, wow, a long time. Then the line. The one I will take to my grave, stitched into the lining of my wrath like a curse. You are replaceable. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't even blink. I just smiled in that polite Midwestern way women do when they are mentally planning the architecture of hell. I went back to my desk, corner office, earned after a decade of eating crap in silence, and pulled out the box I kept underneath. The one I told myself was just in case, though deep down, some feral part of me knew. Inside it, a dried up lip balm, a cracked mug that said Compliance Queen, and a dusty folder labeled Hold for Legal. Sharpied in my own handwriting. That folder was full of sins no company prayer circle could wash off, backdated vendor logs, emails marked confidential, and a sticky note from the CFO that literally said, "Let's just make this disappear." As I packed, coworkers watched like they were trying not to watch. A few gave me pity eyes. One brave soul mouthed, "I'm so sorry," like I'd just been hit by a bus instead of bureaucratic sociopathy. I didn't say goodbye, didn't even log off. I just dropped the security badge on the desk, looked around once, and left through the front door like a ghost who just remembered they were never really alive to begin with. And hey, if you've made it this far and you're part of the 97% of folks listening to these stories without hitting subscribe, maybe now's the time. I'm trying to hit my first 10,000 subscribers, and unlike Verity Line Solutions, I actually value loyalty. Anyway, 2 days later, while scrubbing congealed rice off a casserole dish in my pajamas, I got a LinkedIn message from Alan Roth. He used to work in federal procurement compliance, now had some vague title like Senior Oversight Analyst at the Office of Regulatory Oversight. He did coffee once at a conference in Phoenix. He wore a bolo tie, I remember, and ate soup with a fork. Nice guy, weird, but in a chess master who won't tell you he's winning kind of way. His message, simple, you free for lunch next week? Something I'd like to run past you. Now, most people would assume it's just networking fluff, a bit of catching up. But when a guy who knows the difference between civil penalties and federal indictments asks for lunch, your career just got tossed out like expired yogurt? You go. And I did, wore black, took the train downtown like I still belonged in the bustle. We met at a little place called Duval's where the menu had no prices and the waiters didn't smile. Alan got steak tartare. I got water and a Caesar salad with dressing on the side because you don't show your cards over appetizers. Verity line, he said, slicing raw meat like he was dissecting a confession. Heard they're restructuring. Shame, I said. Then he leaned in and whispered like we were kids at summer camp trading ghost stories. We could use someone like you, someone who knows where the bodies are buried. I didn't flinch, didn't smile. Just dabbed the corner of my mouth with a linen napkin and said, "Tell me more." Alan didn't ask for a resume. He already knew what I'd done. Knew the audits I'd salvaged, the teeth I'd pulled out of falsified Q4 reports. The offshore vendor that magically became domestic for tax purposes thanks to one convenient ZIP code change. Hell, I taught half the compliance seminars his department still used. He just swirled his whiskey like a man with secrets and said, "We've got an opening. Internal Audit Division. Real authority. You'd be reading the entrails of every company like Verity Line in a 100-mile radius." I laughed, bitter and dry. "You mean I get to be the ghost that comes back with a clipboard?" He grinned, "Only if you bring your own pen." I told him I'd think about it, but we both knew I already had. Still, I spent that night pacing my apartment in socks and a sleep shirt that said "World's Okayest Employee." My cat, Milton, stared like he expected me to have a plan. I didn't, not yet. What I had was anger, cold, sharp-edged, wrapped in the betrayal of 12 years' worth of unpaid overtime and gaslight reviews. What I didn't have was a reason to believe I could do anything about it. Who was I, really? Some middle-aged compliance lifer with a drawer full of stolen pens and a LinkedIn banner still featuring last year's ugly corporate retreat. But then I opened that dusty folder again, the hold for legal one. Saw the copy of a vendor contract I was ordered not to timestamp, the doctored budget sheet from Q3, the anonymous note that got slipped under my keyboard in 2020, they're hiding assets offshore. I can't say more. Watch the CTO's emails. I remembered every moment I bit my tongue, every time I was told I was too rigid or not a team player for flagging violations that could have sunk the company twice over. And I realized I wasn't disposable. I was dangerous. Application to the Office of Regulatory Oversight wasn't complicated. Government jobs rarely are. The trick is in the phrasing, knowing which boxes to check, which buzzwords to weave like breadcrumbs through the bland forest of HR speak. I didn't lie. I just chose my truths carefully. When the final screen popped up, asking if I had any prior conflicts of interest or inside knowledge of companies I might regulate, I paused, hovered over the keyboard, and typed, "Yes, Verity Line Solutions, former senior compliance specialist, employed 12 years, And under additional comments, I wrote, I know where the bodies are buried, and I can read a balance sheet like it's a murder confession. 2 weeks passed. During that time, I did what any recently terminated mid-career woman with a grudge and too many notebooks would do. I took up running. Badly. My knees hated it, but it gave me the illusion of motion, of control. I tracked down old ORO case files like bedtime stories, read up on whistleblower statutes for fun. Then one afternoon, as I was making instant coffee with water that tasted like regret and drywall, I got the email. Welcome to the Office of Regulatory Oversight. Orientation begins Monday. No fanfare, no balloons, just the quiet thud of a door swinging open. It wasn't vengeance. Not yet, but it was a key, and I was already standing at the lock. Government onboarding is like being waterboarded with acronyms. I sat through 4 days of training sessions that sounded like rejected Cold War code names. FERPA and FASAB alignment, OMB Circular A123 compliance protocols, the red flags of subcontractor subterfuge. By Wednesday, I had a migraine shaped like a flowchart. But here's the thing. Once you strip away the tedium and the coffee that tastes like burnt tax returns, what's left is power. Real power. The kind you don't get with job titles or office plaques, but with access. I wasn't just in compliance anymore, I was the compliance. The rulebook and the referee. My badge unlocked more than doors. It unlocked databases, records, internal audits, confidential filings, expense logs going back years. Everything that used to be redacted now sat in front of me like an open confession booth, just waiting for a priest with a grudge. One afternoon, buried 3 tabs deep into a quarterly audit review tool, I pulled up Verity Line's financials. Not because I was told to, because I wanted to see if they were still dancing on the same cliff's edge. I spent a decade trying to keep them from tumbling off. At first glance, clean, too clean, like someone had run bleach through the books. But it wasn't the big numbers that gave it away. It was something smaller, a breadcrumb. In Q2, consulting services showed a 43% increase, but the vendor listed hadn't changed. What had changed was the expense code. Same invoice amounts, same payment dates, but halfway through the quarter, they'd been rerouted from operational compliance to strategic forecasting. That's like saying your divorce lawyer is now a yoga instructor because they wear comfortable pants. No memo, no explanation, just shift. To the untrained eye, nothing. But to someone like me, stunk worse than the leftover shrimp cocktail from the 2019 corporate gala I wasn't invited to but audited anyway. That little code shuffle meant they were hiding something, or laundering it. Either way, I knew that trick. It was the digital equivalent of sweeping dirt under a new rug and hoping no one notices the bulge. I flagged the transaction, created a private note in the agency file, and tagged it for escalation. Not because I planned on acting immediately. No, that's not how this works. This wasn't revenge. This was surgery. Slow, careful, clinical. And I knew Verity Line's veins like a vampire. What really lit the match was something Alan said in passing during a smoke break behind the building. He lit a cigarette with the same hand that held a compliance file and muttered, most companies don't get caught because they're smart. They get caught because they think no one's looking. He looked at me then, long, sideways, and I realized now someone is. That night I didn't sleep. Instead, I cracked open my personal backup drive, the one I'd mirrored right before leaving Verity Line. Legally murky, maybe, but let's just say they never gave me an NDA to break. I cross-referenced the category shift with some emails I'd archived. One stood out. A message from the COO sent late at night during Q2. Subject line, let's reclassify this. No body. Just an attachment labeled Q2 Adjustments v Final 2. Use this one. XLSX. And that, my friends, was the whisper that turns into a scream. They hadn't just replaced me. They'd assumed I left empty-handed, but I didn't. And the silence I gave them, it was never surrender. It was strategy. The universe has a sick sense of humor. I found out about my replacement while microwaving leftover chili in the break room at ORO. One had left a copy of Compliance Digest, basically the Tiger Beat of regulatory professionals, open on the counter, and there, in the notable new hires sidebar, was a smug little headshot that made me choke on a kidney bean. Tyler Grisham, 23, joins Verity Line Solutions as Acting Director of Compliance. Previously held an internship at the same firm. Tyler, as in the COO's nephew, is in the walking LinkedIn post who once asked me if we really needed to report gifts under $50 during his summer internship. I remember because he showed me a bottle of scotch labeled $49.99 and winked like he'd hacked the IRS. I looked him up. His LinkedIn summary said, I'm passionate about corporate integrity and scalable frameworks that promote agile ethics. I don't know what that means, but it sounds like it was generated by ChatGPT after being force-fed TED Talks and Axe body spray commercials. No certifications, no CFE, no CPA, not even a damn HRCI badge. Just a frat bro photo, a motivational quote from Elon Musk, and a resume shorter than the attention span of the people who fired me. I sat there, plastic spoon dangling midair, chilly forgotten. They didn't just replace me. They replaced me with this. Later that week, after finishing a required training on whistleblower confidentiality, I did what I told myself I wouldn't do. I searched the agency's internal complaint archive. I told myself it was curiosity, a little victory lap, just to see if Verity Line had popped up since my exit. And it had. Tucked in a database with all the urgency of a forgotten birthday card was a whistleblower complaint filed 8 weeks ago from someone in the procurement compliance unit, my old department. The file had been marked for review but never escalated. Reason: pending workload capacity. The subject line: suspicious offshore payments plus pressure to delete old vendor records. Attached was a 2-page statement, heavily redacted, but the voice, I recognized it. Sarah. Soft-spoken, detail-obsessed, used to bring pistachio muffins to Friday stand-ups. She wouldn't report a paperclip out of place unless she knew something was foul. And it was addressed directly to M. Dreyfus, me, filed the week after I left. I read it 3 times. Then I stood up, walked down the corridor to the audit initiation office, and submitted Form 190. Request for formal compliance audit. Target: Verity Line Solutions. Primary concerns: financial reclassification irregularities, whistleblower suppression, offshore vendor misreporting, and potential willful negligence under the Ethics Reform Act. 24 hours later, I got the green light. No questions, just a 1-line approval. Proceed. Assign primary auditor. Alan slid the paperwork onto my desk the next morning. Didn't say a word, just nodded once like a priest handing over a holy relic. And just like that, the noose started tightening. Not around their necks yet, but around the lies they stacked like Jenga blocks and assumed would never fall. Tyler was about to find out that scalable frameworks don't mean squat when your quarterly reports read like criminal confessions. And this time, there'd be no folder marked hold for legal. There'd just be me. They say most people distance themselves from a burning building. That's not true. Most people watch it smolder from across the street with a mix of popcorn and plausible deniability, unless they built the damn place. Then they run, quietly, discreetly, like rats off a spreadsheet, so I started calling ghosts. Not loudly, no emails, no agency letterhead. Just a few carefully worded texts, some late-night signal messages, and one accidental bump-in at a co-op bakery where one of the old procurement managers now sold vegan donuts like his MBA never happened. First was Jorge, former budget analyst. Smart guy, real nervous now. He met me in a Target parking lot like we were trading uranium instead of corporate gossip. He didn't even roll down his window all the way. "You didn't hear this from me," he muttered, eyes darting like he owed money to the IRS and his ex-wife. "But that intern? Tyler, he's got no clue what he's doing. They gave him read-only access to most of the systems and told the junior team to just make sure it all aligns. That's the actual directive. Make it align, not make it right." I asked if anyone was documenting changes. Jorge snorted. Documenting? Half the entries in Q3 were pasted screenshots from Excel. Don't even ask about vendor 64,731. No one knows who they are, but they invoice monthly and get paid. I thanked him. He sped off like I was radioactive. Next was Diane, used to be the contracts coordinator. Sharp, cynical, and allergic to bullshit. She agreed to coffee, but brought her lawyer cousin and refused to talk unless we sat near a fountain in case they had microphones. I told her I wasn't wearing a wire. She said, "I didn't say you were." She didn't have much, but she confirmed something I suspected. After I left, Verity Line ran 3 internal reports reclassifying vendor payments, none of which were shared with the board. Tyler signed off on 2 of them, she said, but I don't think he understood what he was approving. I saw him copy-paste his digital signature from an old email. Then came Elijah. He didn't meet me at a park or a diner. He mailed me a USB stick. No return address. Just a plain envelope with a note in handwriting I recognized immediately. Just in case they ever blamed me. I plugged it in using a burner laptop at the office. Inside were backups of internal reports from the last 2 years, cross-checked, time-stamped, some clearly marked as V3 final approved, and others V3 final approved redacted for board. There were side-by-side comparisons. Line items changed. Vendor codes removed. Comments in the margins like "clean this up before external eyes and Tyler doesn't need to see this version." My hands didn't shake, not anymore. I opened a new folder on my encrypted drive, case file, Verity Line, and I started sorting. Each file became a nail. Each manipulated transaction, a hammer. Each timestamp deception, another inch of rope pulled tighter. By midnight, I had a 38-page preliminary brief. Annotated, cross-referenced, ready to run through the federal statute shredder like Sunday sermon notes. This wasn't just a case anymore. It was a reckoning with a paper trail. They'd built their lies into spreadsheets, assumed no one would ever read between the columns. But I spoke Excel like a second language. And now, I was building a story. One formula error at a time. The invitation arrived on ivory cardstock like it was 1997, and printers hadn't yet discovered email. Verity Line Foundation Annual Gala for Literacy Initiatives. It read, with just enough glitter in the header to scream tax write-off. I nearly tossed it until I noticed the host sponsor. Langston Keller, Verity Line's own CEO. I RSVP'd yes, not because I wanted to sip lukewarm Chardonnay under chandeliers with people who once pretended not to hear me in meetings, but because the event was public, and I'd been invited as a new face from the Office of Regulatory Oversight. A polite signal to the upper crust. The watchers are among you. I wore a black dress I hadn't dusted off since my niece's ill-fated second wedding, and paired it with the quiet confidence of someone who now carried a badge instead of a building access card. The room was all corporate botox and performative philanthropy. White wine flowed like regret. A jazz trio played near the buffet, and somewhere in the corner, a VP from HR was visibly sweating into his shrimp cocktail. It was beautiful. They seated me at table 6, assigned seats alphabetical, and there, across white linen and awkward place cards, sat her. Cynthia Keller, the CEO's wife. A woman whose entire aura radiated money, pillates, and polite disdain for anyone who brought tap water to a dinner party. I hadn't seen her in years, not since she gave a speech at an employee brunch and referred to us as the little people who make big things happen. She greeted me with the kind of smile that says I don't know who you are, but I was raised to pretend I care. I'm Cynthia, she said, offering a manicured hand. And you are? Marlene Dreyfus, I replied, settling in, Office of Regulatory Oversight. Something flickered behind her eyes, like a bathroom light that doesn't quite turn off. Oh, she said, regulatory, how? Interesting, we chatted, weather, wine, her pilates instructor's hip replacement. It was almost normal, until dessert arrived. Then she leaned in. The kind of lean rich women do when they're about to unleash gossip disguised as curiosity. My husband's been so stressed lately, she said, swirling creme brulee with a gold spoon. Something about a surprise review coming up. Keep snapping at the dog. You wouldn't know anything about that, would you? I smiled like a blade being unsheathed. Probably nothing, I said sweetly. Sometimes leadership gets nervous about audits that never even happen. She laughed too loud. Oh, I know, I told him, if you've done nothing wrong, you've got nothing to worry about. My fork paused midair. I've always found, I replied, that the people who say that tend to have the most to hide. She blinked, then took a long, shaky sip of wine. After dinner, as the speeches dragged on and the donor plaques were handed out like participation trophies, I stood near the back wall, sipping sparkling water and watching the crowd. The CFO was whispering something frantic into his phone. A senior partner from their law firm was making a beeline to the valet, and Langston Keller, he looked like a man whose shadow had started to follow him. I didn't speak to him, didn't need to. My silence was louder than any accusation. Because here's the thing about pressure. It doesn't always come in threats or subpoenas. Sometimes it walks into a ballroom in a black dress, shakes your wife's hand, and tells you without a word that the wolves are not just at the door. They're already inside, and they brought clipboards. The leak hit like a thunderclap. It must have come from inside the ORO, a forwarded email, an overheard hallway whisper, a loose-lipped junior analyst who didn't realize Verity Line still had spies on the payroll. However it happened, the result was instant. By 9:43 a.m. on Tuesday, CEO's assistant had requested an updated audit calendar. By 10:15, I had 3 missed calls from numbers I hadn't seen in over a year. By noon, HR emailed me. Subject line, just checking in, classic. The message was a digital panic attack disguised as casual banter. Hi Marlene, we just wanted to reach out and say we hope you're doing well in your exciting new role. What a small world, right? Let us know if there's anything you need from us. Always happy to help. Warmly, the Verity Line HR team, no signature. No contact name, just that passive-aggressive chirp of a company trying not to hyperventilate while the floorboards catch fire. I didn't reply. 10 minutes later, the CFO, Thomas Just Golf and Offshore Accounts Haverford, called my personal cell. 3 times. The last voicemail was almost adorable in its desperation. Hey Marlene, just saw your name attached to something. Funny, huh? You know, I always respected you. Truly, we should chat, touch base, clear the air. He sounded like a man offering to repaint the gallows. I listened to the voicemail twice, then deleted it. Instead, I opened up the preliminary audit packet. 24 pages of document requests, timelines, procedural declarations, and itemized ledgers. Dry, clinical, nuclear. I added 3 more pages. Specifically, complete vendor payment history for accounts #64731 through #64750, with corresponding POS and approval chain signatures. All internal audit logs and IT access records from Q2 and Q3. A breakdown of any reclassified budget lines over $5,000 in the past fiscal year, flagged for internal or external review. Then I sent it to Verity Line's audit liaison. CC'd the CEO, blind CC'd legal. No greeting, no emojis, just the digital equivalent of a black envelope sliding under the front door. The response came 6 minutes later, received. Will compile and confirm timeline ASAP. Translation, we're sweating bullets in a glass tower and pretending it's air conditioning. That night, I opened a bottle of Merlot and sat on my balcony while the city buzzed below me. I wasn't nervous, not anymore. For the first time in months, I felt still. Because I wasn't reacting anymore, I was directing, steering the storm like a ship's wheel, watching the clouds gather exactly where I wanted them. Verity Line had always thought of me as a cog, a quiet fixture, someone who knew her place. Now, I was the audit lead with a memory like a steel trap and a file drawer full of sins. They replaced me with an intern who couldn't spell due diligence. Now their past was boomeranging back with a badge and a binder. They called it a coincidence. I called it Tuesday. He was already leaning against the hood of his car when I pulled into the empty grocery store lot C, behind a shuttered Kroger that smelled like mold and broken pension plans. The kind of place where secrets get whispered and old coworkers go to die. Nathan Dorrance, former team lead. I direct supervisor for 6 years, and a man whose management style fell somewhere between absent landlord and condescending golden retriever. He used to call me Miss Marlene like he thought it was charming, not paternalistic. Now he looked like he hadn't slept since the leak. Shirt untucked, forehead shining under the parking lot light, left hand twitching against his keys like he might sprint at any second. "You came," he said. "I'm here," I replied, deadpan. He nodded, eyes darting like a nervous raccoon. "Look, I don't have much time. This is not official. I wasn't told to contact you, okay?" "Sure," I said. My phone was recording in my coat pocket, running a clean, time-stamped audio log straight to a secure ORO drive via proxy relay. I made sure the mic caught everything. Nathan opened his trunk. For one stomach-turning second, I thought he was about to show me a body. Instead, pulled out a manila envelope, fat, sealed, no markings. He held it like it was a hot potato he couldn't wait to throw into someone else's lap, I was told. "This might smooth things out," he said, "just to make this whole thing." "Go quiet." "Smooth," I repeated, like bribes tend to be. "It's not a bribe," he snapped, then immediately caught himself and looked around like the pavement had ears. "It's a goodwill gesture, MMM." I didn't take it. He stepped closer. "Come on, Marlene. You know what happens if this goes public. The layoffs, the board shakeup. Hell, you think the interns get blamed? No, the people who knew get gutted." I tilted my head. "You mean the ones who watched it all happen? Who approved falsified reports and looked the other way while vendor payments got shuffled like a shell game?" He blinked. I could practically hear the denial short-circuiting in his brain. "I'm trying to help you," he said, weaker now. "You don't have to be the one who pulls the trigger." "But Nathan," I said softly, "I'm not pulling anything. I'm just pointing out the gun they already loaded." I walked past him, got in my car, left the envelope sitting on the asphalt like a forgotten sin. Back home, I took off my coat and opened the final draft of the audit report. 7 potential violations. 3 likely criminal. Dozens of inconsistencies, digital fingerprints, altered logs, reclassified expenditures. One bizarrely bold email chain where Tyler asked if they could just delete the flagged payments and hope nobody notices. I highlighted the timeline, labeled each section with brutal clarity. There would be no wiggle room, no plausible deniability. Everything was in motion now. The pre-audit window had closed, the elevator cable was cut, all that was left was gravity. And 9 o'clock a.m., tick, tock, the lobby hadn't changed. Same fake marble floors, same citrus-and-suffering air freshener, same front desk woman pretending not to see anything. Except this time I didn't need a badge. I had authority. I walked in at exactly 8:59 a.m. Behind me, 2 junior auditors in pressed blazers, carrying laptops like weapons of quiet destruction. They didn't know the whole backstory, just enough to follow my lead and stay out of my way. The receptionist blinked at my badge, her mouth opening like a fish gulping for air. "Why, you're here for the review?" "Audit," I corrected. "Regulatory." The word hung in the air like a guillotine. 3 seconds later, the CEO appeared, Langston Keller. No tie, pale, eyes darting like he was looking for an escape hatch that didn't exist. He had that politician smile stretched too tight, like he was trying to remember how charm worked. "Marlene," he said. Extending a hand, he quickly realized I wasn't going to shake. "Wow, look at you. New role, huh? We're excited to work with you on this quick thing. Shouldn't take too long, right?" I held his gaze, calm as a coffin lid. "That depends on what we find." Behind him, HR stumbled out of their office with clipboards and a tray of untouched coffee. Karen, the same Karen who told me I was replaceable, stammered something about supporting transparency and streamlining document access. Her voice cracked halfway through streamlining. I said nothing, just smiled. Then we were led to the 7th floor conference room. Someone had hastily set out water bottles and a plate of still frozen pastries. The projector was already running. Someone must have been up all night trying to tidy up the digital trail. Too late. I sat at the head of the table, opened my first binder, flipped to page 3. "Let's begin," I said, looking directly at the CEO, with vendor account hash 64,731. I believe in a previous internal memo, it was referred to as non-essential. Interesting, considering they billed $312,400 in Q3 and no one seems to know who approved it. Silence. HR's pen clattered to the floor. The younger auditor began typing, fingers flying like a courtroom stenographer recording a public execution. I kept going, page after page, each question sharper than the last. Inconsistencies lined up like dominoes, cross-reference statements, a payment trail that jumped time zones and ethics with equal agility. Karen tried to interrupt once. I raised a single finger. She stopped. Across the table, Langston's face was turning blotchy. His shirt stuck to him like guilt. He wasn't speaking anymore, just breathing harder. Each exhale sounded like a prayer wrapped in denial. I closed the binder. For today, we'll focus on accounts payable, internal audits, and subcontractor documentation. I assume the files have all been prepped per the request I sent last week. No answer. I stood. We'll be reviewing on-site for the next several days, possibly weeks, depending on the level of cooperation. I turned to the junior auditors. Let's set up. As they moved to plug in laptops, I looked back at the room. Karen, eyes wide like she'd just seen her own career obituary. Langston, sinking into his chair like a man realizing the water is rising and there's no ladder. This is only day one, I said, voice steady, and the door shut behind me like a sentence being carried out. You're the real MVPs of the office jungle. Thanks for watching. Smash that subscribe button, or the coffee pot might just forget your next brew.